I can't believe that these artists in quotes on TikTok and other social media platforms keep trying to fake AI art and call it their own art, and then they keep also trying to fake the art process alongside of it. Like, do you think we are dumb? Do you think we can't tell? Let me get into this because we have another case of one of these AI art scammers. Right before I get into it, I kind of feel like I'm channeling like Chinese Cinderella with this like really, really yellowy blonde hair with this specific shade of blue and with this specific lip color. So let me know if you see it. I'm kind of liking it, but curious. Anyways, let's get into this video. So this is the account in question, and I have no idea why. When I open up TikTok on my computer, it just literally yeets out anybody's profile photo. Again, everything I'm gonna say is alleged. Me stating that they are using AI art is me as a art enjoyer and consumer using my own two eyeballs, and it is my suspicion, but it is that a suspicion, an allegation, and please don't send hate to anybody involved. Now let's get into this. If you notice here, they have in what I'm showing you an art piece that they have posted like 10 videos about. Okay, maybe it's like 7. It's about this like chibi girl with big elf ears and horns kind of in a hood. So she has this drawing and it is very sus. Let me break it down to you. Let's start on the videos, okay? So again, there is some audio, but it's muted. In this video, she's showing us her sketching process. We can see it took her an hour to make this sketch, and out the gate, the sketch to me is already very suspicious. We'll analyze it in a second though, because we'll do a more in-depth analyzation of the sketch when I pull up the more in-depth photo, right? The actual photo. But this is already weird to me. You see how she's showing you the process of her doing the sketch, and the process is a bit odd. Now, I'm gonna add a big disclaimer right here so that people don't get mad at me in the comment section, okay? Everybody has a different art process. Just because you don't draw in the same way I do doesn't mean that you draw poorly, okay? I draw in my specific way, everybody else draws in their own specific way, okay? Just because you have a process that looks like what I'm going to explain to you and looks like this person does not mean I am accusing you of using AI art. I think we can use our two brain cells up here and conclude that, right? My accusation of them using AI art is a lot of things together, and all of those together paint the full picture of my suspicion that there is AI art being used here, or AI being used in the process. If you just happen to do one of the things I mentioned, that's just you doing your own art process. So let me add that, okay? I do not mean to imply that you, if you do one of these things, are not a true artist, okay? But what is odd to me is that typically when people do sketches for their artwork, they will sketch out like a really, really, really blocky sketch of a piece, and then they tend to flesh it in more. You don't often see people draw sketches like this where they out the gate already know where everything belongs and they don't need to change anything. Like out the gate, this artist already knows that this head is going to be at a 3/4 profile. She already knows exactly where to draw the eyes in. She already knows elaborately sketches in the eyelashes, the eyes, the lips. We haven't seen anything else yet, not even like the rest of the body, etc. Like at this frame when I'm gonna freeze it, right? We already have the entire face filled in. This sketch is good enough to be line work, honestly. But nothing else is drawn. We don't see the horns, we don't see the cape, we don't see anything else. I feel like if people draw like this, right, where they do extremely elaborate sketches like this, there's going to be some modifications that will have to be made because you don't know where the horns are. So after you fill in the face, you start drawing the horns, you're like, "Oh, this looks a little wonky. Maybe I'm going to move this thing around." But somehow this artist is able to draw a sketch that's so elaborate it could serve as line art, but item by item, like eyeball by eyeball, like, and then onto the mouth, and then onto the jawline, and then onto the elements of the head. Like typically you get a really, really, really rough, blocky sketch looking thing, and then we can maybe move on to like filling it in a little bit more. There are legitimate artists who do work like this, but this, with everything else I'm going to point out to you, is suspicious. So that is the sketch. Now she shows us the coloring process of this art piece. And one thing I do want us to note too is that she is working in Procreate here, so this will kind of become relevant a little bit later in the conversation. To me, some aspects of the coloring is also a little bit confusing, mainly because the other eye is completely done. And then she moved on to the left eye. Again, some artists do work like this, but you don't see this process very often. You don't often see artists completely finishing one eye and then moving on to the other eye. Look, as an artist who also draws in this like semi-realistic style, I've done it a lot in the past, not so much anymore. I feel like as an artist, we're lazy, okay? Like we try to take shortcuts whenever possible. And it's a lot easier if you're drawing two of the same thing, like two eyes, right? To you know, color in the white of the right eye and then color in the white of the left eye. So therefore, I don't have to color select twice. And then I'm gonna color in the iris of the right eye yellow, and I will use the same yellow for the iris of my left eye. So I've seen artists work like chunk by chunk. Like some artists do like to draw like that. I personally don't render like this. I'll render like, I'll do the entire flat color for the entire piece and then do an entire pass through of the shadows. Some artists will completely render just the nose and then move on. Like some artists do work like that. But for the same thing, like for two eyeballs, okay, you often don't see artists rendering completely finishing one eye and then moving on to the other eye. That is not often seen in the process. It's just harder to do it that way. To me, her art process is a bit suspicious because a lot of the things that she does doesn't make much sense. As in, like, it doesn't seem like there's a very solid kind of rhyme or reason as to why it's done that way. So we can see here that there's the white of the eye, right? And you can see the white of the eye is completely filled in. It's a kind of like a teardroppy shape, right? That's how eyes are shaped. And then on the next frame, she will go and fill in like a black airbrushing for the eyeliner. You see here how she's doing the eyeliner. Now watch. She's gonna go and swoop in and make a backwards C, but it's not going to follow the shape of the eye. Like right here, that stroke here. It maybe I'm looking too much into it. This just it to me is a bit odd because it's like, why is that there? Again, like I do semi-realistic art. I've done that in the past, right? Typically, like the eyeliner would kind of cover the entire eye, and then you do have the the tear duct right in the inside. Rendering it like this with straight black like that on the first pass through is kind of odd of a color choice. That's why to me, like, and then you'll see it again in when she goes through the speed paint. There's other points I'll point out to you that look suspicious, where it kind of looks like it's been color selected off the background, right? Where it's like, oh, you know, like, oh, here's this like AI generated image. Let me color select off of it and put this color here without knowing why the color is there. Oh my God, totally distracted for a second, but my cat is napping and look at him. He is honked out on my laundry. Okay, and this is what's weird too. It's just some of the way that it's shaded or like colored in is a bit odd to me. Again here, like this was again odd to me. So she's going to go and like draw in a black line, but above the white of the eye. What's the point of drawing the white of the eye like this if you're not gonna follow along the line you made? You know what I mean? It's just the choice of doing it like that is a bit odd. Like, why leave that gap there? That's not how eyes work. Unless you're tracing off of something below it. You know, Yellenast, the other artist I made a video about, this is like the budget version of Yellenast. Like, this just does not make sense to me. The way the eye was lined like this. What is again odd is in the white of the eye, like black lines were drawn in as a shadow for the eyelashes, but the eyelashes aren't there. I mean, maybe you can do it, right? I guess some people will draw the shadow in first. It's just odd because typically artists don't work like that. And then so that's what I'm saying, right? Like you as an artist might do like one of these things or a couple of these things, but we start putting everything in together, then it's like, this is a bit odd. It's just a bit odd of a choice. So here we have some more rendering again. And then, by the way, if we look at this frame now, look, the eye is like more rendered. And now you see the white of the eye makes sense. Because there is the water line of the lower lash line that's now drawn in. But the way that it was drawn in was weird. I hope you guys are catching my drift and that like it makes sense there is a water line. Anatomically speaking, humans do have that on their like lower lash line and their upper lash line. But just the way that it was drawn in with like filling in the white of the eye and then drawing a black line just above the bottom of the white of the eye to then do it that way. It's just an odd process, I feel like. But here we have the lips kind of getting rendered in here. And in this part of the rendering, there's not too much we can see because it's not that close up. It's a little bit further out of like filming. The thing that throws me off is like some of the blending and like coloring that is happening is a bit reminiscent of, again, what that other artist Yellenast does, where what Yellenast does is they kind of have like an image that is either drawn or generated, right? Up for debate there. And then they have a image on top of that they kind of like color in. So maybe they'll like completely block the face in with only the skin color, right? So you won't see the other features. And they'll erase the top layer to reveal the layer below it. And some of the rendering, it feels a little bit reminiscent about that to me, like where color just kind of appears. Again, maybe I could be fucking crazy, right? But it's just a bit suspicious to me. And then here she shows us the speed painting. Okay, so this video is captioned 6 hours of drawing in 20 seconds. And again, she goes on to render the entirety of the right eye before moving on to the left eye. And then we move on to the hair. But again, I just want you to look at how everything is rendered. It's just chunk by chunk, but the chunks don't even make sense because she starts rendering the hair, but then only the bangs. And then she moves on to part of the hood. If you're gonna render chunk by chunk, then like do it chunk by chunk, you know? Like if you're gonna fully render the face and then move on to the hair, then fully render the hair. I'm sorry if I sound a little heated. It's not about you, it's about this. It's just a very odd process to work like that, to like fully render the bangs. The bangs are completely rendered in, and then we're gonna move on to the hood without finishing the rest of the hair. It's just such an awkward like series of processes. And then we move on to one horn. So she will draw in one complete horn and then one ear. Mind you, again, this girl's going to have a second horn and a second ear, but we didn't do any of that. And that's it. That's all we get. That's why it's just weird to me. Also, what is suspicious, and this is another thing that you will see, and I'll point out, but this is another thing that makes it very reminiscent of AI art, right? Somebody who used AI art and then is pretending the AI art is their actual artwork because the light source instantly appears. They draw in without having any indication of where the light is coming from, what the light source is, and they don't change it later. So I'm doing this like super poorly in Photoshop, right? But again, I'm just doing this because I'm a visual learner, so I feel like maybe this will make it more clear. And sorry, this is gonna look absolute jank because I'm literally drawing with my mouse right now. All right, so here's our stick figure guy, okay? Our stick figure person is called Bob. I feel like most people, when they will draw in their character on the background, you know, they will do some sort of light source. They will have some sort of lighting. So maybe Bob will have some sort of like glow on his face, like some shadows already drawn in. Cause you know, you're an artist. So you're kind of like, okay, Bob might have a shadow on his chin like this. And then there might be some shadows under his arms. I don't know, right? Like whatever you want to do for Bob. Oh God, it's so hard doing this with a mouse. Jesus. Okay, but you kind of get my point, okay? There'll be some basic shadows here. But then I feel like for most artists, when there's an extreme light source going on, so let's say that we decide Bob is going to be God or something, and we're gonna put like a super bright light behind Bob. A really, really bright orange light. I'm making it orange just so it stands out better, right? I feel like most people will then draw in the environmental light source, so in this case, this bright light on Bob, and then they add the extreme light source onto their character. So in this case, Bob will probably get like a halo around his face, an orange halo or something to draw in the environmental light. I'm sorry, this looks so bad. I'm literally using my mouse, but you get my point, right? Like Bob will have like environmental light drawn in afterwards, kind of like this. So Bob is blending into the environment, something like that, okay? Absolute gods of an artist will and can draw in the environmental light source even without having to do any sort of background art, draw in the light source, whatever. They can just do it because they're absolute gods. I'm not trying to flame this artist specifically, but they don't have like the 20 years of industry art experience that would then warrant somebody to draw like that. Maybe they're an absolutely gifted artist. I could be wrong. But most of the time, people don't render with such extreme environmental lighting already into the piece without drawing the background in first. Now we're on the next stage. Drawing in the textures of the hair. And the hair rendering is very weird here. It is very like step by step. It's very odd. And again, it comes in so late. Like half the hood is drawn in. Only half, by the way. Remember, we didn't get the other half of the hood. But half the hood is now drawn in. Both horns, one braid, but we still don't have the other half of the hair. And it's just odd because they draw such limited strokes for the hair. It's just tiny, 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 tiny little strokes, which again, it kind of tells me that, hey, this is probably generated by AI, right? That they are faking the art process for. And because they don't know how to draw a piece like that, they're trying to, because just look at the way the hair is drawn. Because this just to me looks like somebody who's drawing that doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're like, oh, I need to do this right now, but they don't look like they know why they have to make such a choice. And I also think it's really odd how they go back and forth between drawing the environmental lighting on the bangs to the wispy hair down here. Then they go back to the bangs, then they go back down here, then they go back. It's just odd to me because it's just a lot of different colors that have to be used, right? Like this is like an orange basically, and this hair is dark brown. So it wouldn't make sense for them to go back and forth if they were using the same color and they're like, oh, since I color selected dark brown, let me put dark brown in some of the places I want dark brown to be in. And here's one of the things with AI art and that AI does, right? AI tends to extremely overuse the amount of colors. Like it will use like really, really different shades of orange, but like slightly different that you don't often see with actual artists just because it's very time consuming to color select like that. But that's kind of the vibes I'm getting here. What's the point of drawing such short wispy hair like this, like very, very short, if you're just gonna go and make it longer anyways? That's just what's odd to me about the entire drawing process about this. And I love how this caption reads, I just love the detail in the silver and how it's not just random squiggly lines and how the cape definitely doesn't blend into the ear, which you see here we have the ear and then the teal for the cape, and they're like melting into each other, which again is very odd because as an artist, if you genuinely drew the piece, every single brushstroke is put down with intention. Like, you know why you made that choice. And of course, there's accidents. Sometimes you forget a finger or whatever. But I feel like most artists wouldn't accidentally melt the ear into the hood. They're completely different colors. Now on to the next piece. Oh, wow. It's like almost done, guys. And the irony too is because they are copying AI, right? The mistakes are still there. Like the mistakes from AI generation are still present in their piece because they didn't draw this themselves. So therefore they didn't know how to correct the mistakes AI made. Like here we have an elf girl, but both ears look really different. I know it's a 3/4 perspective, right? But this ear wouldn't be this much shorter than this ear. And then not to mention again, the ear completely melting into the teal hood. Just some of it is just melting into each other. This horn comes all the way down. I don't know if you guys see this. It like intersects into her hood. There's no end to it. The horn is still relatively thick. It looks like it's gonna grow straight back into her head, which actually like does happen to some animals, but that is again odd. And again, with the silver jewelry with very arbitrary details, more silver jewelry with like very arbitrary details. This just looks very AI to me. And to me, this is weird. The way that she's like drawing in the brush strokes for the hair strands just looks a bit odd because I know she's trying to color select, right? You can see here, like pressing the finger down on Procreate onto the tablet will color select the color you're picking. But the brush strokes that appear don't match up with the strokes that her brush makes to me. Let me see if I can like prove it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's legitimate, right? It could be. Especially because when I slow it down, it pixelizes it a little too much to be fully certain. Like here, she color selects the teal, right? So then she's drawing in teal strands of hair. Then she moves down here. So she should still be using teal because we did not see her color select a different color. Otherwise, it would pop up, right? With that circle selector. So here she should still be drawing in teal, except it's not teal. Like maybe I'm tripping, right? Maybe I'm absolutely tripping, but there's just brush strokes that don't make sense to me. But again, we kind of go back and forth in the drawing process and oh, we have this piece. Now as another time lapse, 10 hours of drawing and 40 seconds to be continued. So again, the beginning of the time lapse still looks very reminiscent to how it looked in the first video that we saw, the first time lapse. And again, the art process is just odd because like, again, if you look at it here, this is another part that I thought was odd to me, right? She draws in the hood. So she like already blocks out all of these spots where there's not gonna be stuff, I guess, right? Like maybe this is where the braid is. Then she draws in the braid and there's a big gap. Like you see the big white gap here? And then later it gets, I mean, maybe it's a mistake. And then this gets rendered in? Whatever that's supposed to be. It's just that the art process to me is highly suspicious. And then somebody commented, can people stop pretending to draw AI images? And they posted a video, another speed paint, you know, it's literally the same speed paint. And in the caption, they write, every day I hear these accusations, but this isn't AI. To prove it, there are plenty of speed paints and now I'm uploading the stats of the drawing and the number of layers. I will take your words as compliments. So here we can see the stats. Again, total strokes made 22,000, track time 9 hours 51, total file size 451. And here we can see all of the layers. I know I'm being really nitpicky right now. It's because of the AI suspicion. But typically for at least if I were to draw a piece like this highly rendered, like that's out of my skill capability first off. But two, like when I draw pieces that are extremely highly rendered, like there's like hundreds of layers, hundreds. That's again my art process, right? Like everybody has their own art processes. Some people just use very few amount of layers. But something that other people pointed out that was a little bit suspicious online is the fact that everything is a normal layer. If you guys don't know with Procreate, you can change the blend mode of the layer to, you know, to like multiply, add, subtract, whatever. But it would indicate here next to the check mark. So on the left of the check mark, it says N. And what N stands for is normal. If you were to make like a multiply layer, it would say like M or something like that. It would not say N. So that's just why it's a bit suspicious. Here's another thing that I think is odd. I could be wearing a tinfoil hat, guys, and I could be overanalyzing this. But there is no layer number 1. This will be important later, so I want you to remember this, okay? When you make layers in Procreate, as you open up new layers, they will be numbered in the order that you made the layer. So if you open up and you make a new layer, it will say like layer 1. Then you make another one, it'll say layer 2, and it'll keep going onwards. Background color is separate, and that is default. There will always be a background color layer. I think you can maybe toggle that off. I've never done it. If we scroll through, the very bottom layer is layer 46, which is like fine, right? Because some people draw the background last, you click, you drag it all the way to the bottom. I do that. But as we can see, the topmost layer is layer 17, 19, 13, 7, 9, 25. You know, you don't need me to read this out for you guys. And then she scrolls down a little bit. We can see these are all double digit numbers, right? She scrolls. Okay, the lowest number here is an 8. Scrolls again, there's like a 5, there's a 3, there's a 6, there's a, yeah, that was a 5. There's no layer number 1. And another thing I want to point out that's really weird to me in the layers is that these layers look like, again, layers from somebody who's like faking an art process, because the things do not make sense. If you look at layers 4 and 5, layers 4 is the white of the left eye plus the entirety of the left iris. But it also has the white of the right eye, a little bit of yellow, I guess, for the iris. And then layer 5 has all of the shading for the left eye, but there's a big hole in the middle because the iris is on the layer below. But then on layer 5, it's all of the iris of the right eye. So it's just weird that they would do it like that, right? Layer 4 has all of one eyeball, except for some shading, and only half of the other eye. And then layer 5 has the other half of the other eye and some shading. That's just why it's odd to me. Like, again, if you do your layers like this, let me know in the comment section down below. There's just so many oddities in this person's art process that I don't personally believe that it is not AI. And then here we get the actual speed paint. So this is the drawing in of the sketch that I told you guys we were gonna look at earlier. Now we get to look at how the sketch is drawn in. Okay, and this is, again, odd to me because, again, we have the entirety of the right eye that gets drawn in, and then almost all of the left eye, and then we draw in part of the face, and it kind of seems like she was like, oh shit, I forgot to draw the iris for the left eye. Let me go draw that in now. And then they draw the iris in. That's what I'm saying. Again, there are artists who legitimately draw piece by piece, right? Like eye first, then the... But then you would finish it, right? You would completely draw in the right eye and then move on to the left eye. I feel like forgetting the iris is quite a big thing. And then we have like the most elaborate face jewelry drawn in. Again, nothing else is drawn in. And another aspect that's quite suspicious is, again, right? Some people do draw like this. They do fully illustrate the sketch that so well that it could pass as line art, but things would have to change. Like after they do it, if they don't do the block method, right, where you draw a bunch of blocks and circles and then you fill it in and then make it more detailed, typically you're gonna have to change things. You're gonna have to liquefy a little bit. You're gonna have to resize the face. Maybe one eye is a little crooked. Maybe like the horn isn't exactly where you want it. But again, with this person, out the gate, the sketch is perfect. So good to the point where they can go straight into rendering. With such an elaborate sketch, I don't really believe that. And one thing that's odd to me as well is like the whites of the eyes aren't the same color. It's this very like, this one's a very gray, like mossy green color. This one's the more blue. Again, this is something that like if you have an extensive knowledge of color theory and how to blend characters into the environment, yada, 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 you can do this. You would know. But to me, this reads as color selecting because they're so similar and yet just slightly different in shade. That's why it's just suspicious to me. So yeah, the art process is quite weird. And then now here's what some other people have to say, and then we're gonna go back and look at that account's other art pieces. So this is by an account by the name of Divya Soup.
This is such a perfect point because it perfectly illustrates why this isn't possible. No matter what you're drawing, you're bound to make adjustments as you go. Most people who do not do this are people who have been training for years and years, and this reflects for them in traditional art more than anything else. It is much easier to erase and use undo digitally than it is traditionally. And no matter what, if you are not tracing something, you will inevitably need to use the erase button or the undo button. And Procreate speed paints record every undo you do, which means that would be visible within the time lapse. The fact that it isn't directly shows this is tracing. Most people cannot draw so easily. Most people will make adjustments. I'm drawing this face to show that even someone who has been drawing for over a decade and has been to a literal art school is going to struggle to draw things perfectly the first time. There are adjustments I'm making. I'm not getting shapes perfectly. And considering the speed at which she is creating everything, there is absolutely going to be a mistake, which she will inevitably have to fix. Perfect lines are not possible. Large lines are not possible without undos, unless you are tracing off of something underneath. At the very least, I hope you guys can agree that this is not her original work. You might personally sketch in a different way than me, but no one can make a composition a fully rendered composition without doing some editing.
And remember how I told you that we never saw a layer number 1 in her set of layers. Again, it's not necessarily a smoking gun, right? She could have like done a base sketch and then deleted. Actually, no, that's not even true though, because we don't even see the sketch. Like we see the time lapse and there wasn't any. Anyways, I don't know. Maybe she made an empty blank layer number one and then deleted it and then made layer number two and then sketched on the second layer. It's a bit suspicious if you show us your layers. There is no layer number one, and your sketch looks perfect out the gate, and your rendering is perfect out the gate with not a single undo, modification, adjustment that you ever had to make to your artwork. And the process is very suspicious in the way that it's rendered, like piece by piece, not even piece by piece, it's like chunk by chunk. All of that to me is very suspicious, which is why I believe that piece was traced off of AI art. I actually do think that a good chunk of the brushstrokes might be organically made by the artist, but there is tracing of an AI piece involved in this. And I don't necessarily want to go straight down the list and like absolutely nitpick on somebody's art like that, but a lot of times when it comes to people with AI art accusations, we can look at their older pieces to see if there's like potential elements of like AI that was used in previous pieces. So we can see that their second most recent art piece they've done, because they just post like chunk by chunk of like what pieces they've made, is this illustration. So the caption reads, "The lines come to life and certain color will be added. What shades should I do?" And it's kind of like a drawing of a face, but it's extremely intricate, which again, it's a face and then there's like another eye and then there's something kind of like drooping off of it. And you're again telling me that there was no planning on this, as in like out the gate, you did one extremely elaborate sketch and it was perfect for a piece this intricate. And then here's the speed paint. There's like other videos that she's made about this, but or this piece specifically. This speed paint again is odd to me for a number of reasons. It's again, it's a very patchwork set of work. You could argue, oh, okay, so but like because of the nature of how this piece looks like, right? It's one person with like a whole bunch of eyes. Maybe she's just doing eyeball by eyeball. That would make sense in theory, except this sketch is extremely elaborate with a lot of like guidelines in terms of like where to color in, but she doesn't even follow her own guidelines, which is why it's like odd to me. This chunk of the eye is drawn and then this chunk of the nose, but she doesn't connect the two, even though it's basically the same thing. There's just like a small sliver of like a white line running in between that will then later get blended in together, right? Like part of this eye has a pink highlight that continues down onto the nose. And then if you see here, there's a lot of these like S-shaped kind of like guidelines of where things are flowing on the face, but she doesn't even color within her own sketch guidelines that she spent that long drawing, which again is like, what's the point of making a sketch this elaborate if you don't use it? Which tells me that again, this person is likely tracing because they don't seem to kind of have an understanding of why things are done the way they're done. And again, look at the completed piece, right? The eye blends straight into the nose. So there was no point in not connecting them. That's why it just feels like there was kind of no understanding of why it should be done. But if you are the person that created the piece, you should know. All right, so over here we have this alien piece, and this is like her most viral piece, I suppose, right? Somebody says, how many layers is that one? That's gorgeous, by the way. And they say, so far it's 35 layers. I'm not done yet, and 9 hours painting. Personally, I would use much more layers, but that's just me. But again, I want you to notice like what is there. The topmost layer is layer number 3. There's no layer number 1 or 2 for that matter. That's why it's suspicious. Here's another piece of the video that they've made, that moment when you weren't planning on doing any serious sketching, and then bam, how did this happen? Another extremely elaborate sketch. And this is again kind of reminiscent of AI. Like to me, this sketch is AI generated for a couple of things that I'm gonna point out, right? Because again, there's like things that are there with no rhyme or reason. There's like swirls and lines that have no rhyme or reason for being here. Is I guess done to make it, or to make the art piece look quote unquote complex. But if you think a little bit more about why that brushstroke is there, it doesn't make very much sense. For one, like the random like swirls on her face, there's just a bunch of random lines on her face. That again, somebody who's capable of doing a sketch this elaborate would likely know why, or the lines would make more sense. More random circles on the chin. The hands are a bit of a giveaway to me in terms of why it looks odd, because this finger looks like a bit of a sausage, but then these 3 fingers look the same. Right? They look very similar, but this one just looks extremely out of place for some reason. And then if you look at these fingers as well, we have 4 fingers here, but the random swirls on the fingers kind of don't make sense. And then there's just lines that are broken, like this finger line here is broken, and then it continues again. And then not to mention that this mask looks like it's supposed to have eyelashes, I think, but the eyelashes aren't even the same across from eye to eye. Like this eyelash here versus this one. This to me looks AI generated. I could point out more, but I'll just leave it at that. The two other big things for me is one, the extreme variety of art styles, right? Like she goes from this like semi-realist style, like semi-realism doing portraits, into drawing a super cracked out looking cat, like tiger thing, into drawing an alien extremely well, into drawing this type of like extremely highly saturated art piece to this chibi elf girl. Like again, the thing is people who draw animals extremely well, you know, people who like furry art, like more animalistic art, they again typically focus on mainly that. So people who focus on drawing people tend to struggle a little bit more with drawing animals because they focus more on one versus the other. Vice versa, people who like to draw a lot of animals typically struggle a little bit more to draw actual humans because their main practice is not humans. Same thing with people who draw aliens extremely realistically. So the art style to me is all over the place, even or like the subject of the art. These are all like extremely highly realistic quote unquote art pieces. But the subject matter of the art is really all over the place to me. And then we get down to here. And this is a quick sketch that she did on August 27th, 2024. And then she's kind of like drawing things in. Like, this looks human made. This looks human made. This does not look like her other art pieces, though. It does not. This is from August 27th, 2024. And then we have this drawing of a parrot on October 4th. And then on November 27th, she draws like this. So in 3 months, she went from drawing like this to like this. Some people can progress really quickly in their art careers. I don't necessarily believe this person is. This piece is also giving AI for a number of reasons. The irises, again, do not match up. This iris is like kind of compressed inwards. This one is not. The chain detailing, again, does not add up, right? I don't know what's going on here. This is a chain link, except the links don't even link up correctly. And then the circle details on the mask don't even add up. Like, I could say more, but I'm just gonna leave it at that, right? So that's just why, to me, it's just very suspicious, the jump in quote unquote progress of their artistic abilities, and then they now can draw like this. I'm curious about your thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you think it's AI art? How do you think the process was faked if you do think it's AI art? And at the end of the day, look, I don't want this to be a situation where you send hate to the artist. I don't want it to be like that. The whole point of me making these videos is to educate you guys on what allegedly using AI art to fake your art process could look like. Because other artists might look at this account and be like, oh my god, in the period of 3 months, she went from drawing like how I draw currently to an absolute cracked out art god. Like, how did this happen? And then you feel bad about yourself because you're like, why can't I make the progress that this artist made? Don't feel bad about yourself because it's not legitimate. It is a faked process, and that's how they got there. So that's why I'm making this video, to educate you guys about it. I don't want to bash on the artist, whatever. I mean, they're doing their own thing. As much as I personally don't agree with the usage of AI art, is what it is, right? So anyways, if you like this video, I appreciate it if you like to subscribe. I also have an Etsy shop in which I sell digital goods and assets for streamers, and I also have a coffee in which I have free resources for streamers, and I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST. So I hope to catch you guys there or in another one of my videos. Peace.